So my 6.9 wouldn't start after I changed the gear shifter bushings, and my mechanic suggested it was a possible solenoid on the starter motor because the starter would only click and that was it. So disconnect the battery when working on the starter because a lot of current goes through it. Just taking the battery off, up the car goes. Doing this on the ground would not be pleasant at all. Surprisingly, the starter's better access than on, I think, the M110 because it hangs down a bit lower from my limited dealings. So you can see the starter in there on the left side of the vehicle. The bolts are accessible from the rear. There is only two of them. And there is an earth for the starter going off to the chassis. You can see the two 19s there, I think they were. The bottom one, even with a reasonable wrench, not so good. Even with a breaker bar, not so good. I am a skinny guy, so I cracked out the big boy, and there it goes, it releases it, and then I was able to just put a ratchet on there and undo that. The top one does not give access to a socket attachment of any sort. You can see the big boy won't get in there, and so basically I just got the wrench on there, and it hadn't been cranked up to nearly the same amount of torque as the bottom one. So after you break it, I then just put the socket, not the socket, I'm sorry, the wrench on there and got it out with a lot of turns. The bolt doesn't even come out all the way, but that's enough to get the starter off. So just undoing the lower one. I'm sorry, I'm trying to film with one hand and do it at the other same time. The earth is released. So I then try to get the starter motor out, but I realise I haven't undone all the wiring harness. Now this will come out of that space once the harness is undone, so I push it back up there. There's 4 wires, 2 are underneath a 13mm nut, and then 2 smaller wires, one is under a Phillips and one is under a flathead. Now those smaller wires, you can't really put the screws through the wrong one because the larger one won't fit through the smaller attachment. So after undoing them, you can get the starter out. This thing is heavy, so do not drop that on your toe or anything important. You can see me here just undoing the 13 to get the first 2 wires off. I'm sorry, I'm not knowledgeable enough to know which one is which and what their roles are. All I know is I wanted to change the starter for a spare unit that I had. So off they go. And then it's time to undo the smaller ones. I'm sorry about the limited light here. So I'm undoing the flathead here. And no major dramas, these weren't on too hard. Try not to drop the screws here. And then I'm onto the Phillips. I just put a particular colour tape around one of the two just to make sure I didn't mix them up. I also put the ladder there in case the thing suddenly dropped out. I don't want it smashing everything. And then the starter actually just comes out. So here's my starter motor, which was reconditioned, I don't know, probably around 16, 17 years ago. And my mechanic felt there was likely the solenoid on top there that was the problem. So I'm going to give this to a qualified electrician to sort this out. Again, I'm not that knowledgeable on such things, but I can take a part out. So that's not actually the part number you're interested in for a 6.9 starter motor, but just showing my one I've taken off. You can see there the teeth there. There's no horrible grooving on them. There's the actual starter motor number for a 6.9. And on top, the solenoid, the part number 0331303021. You need that whole part number. It looks like you can still buy them, which I'm kind of surprised by. So now it's time to have a look at the ring gear, which the starter motor engages to get the motor going. And you can see there's no gouges in the ring gear. I actually had that replaced. That was probably about at the same time I had the starter motor years ago. So this is a spare starter I had lying around from a wrecked 6.9. I've just run the heat resistant paint over it before I chuck it in there. I don't want it looking like a dog's breakfast, even though I'll probably put the original one back when repaired. So the old on the left, the spare one on the right. It's the same stuff, slightly different numbers. Not quite sure what the relevance of those little numbers down the bottom are, which differ. Now there's the solenoids. I'm not sure why there's so many numbers. That 27222 seems to be on the 6.9 starters. And the starter part number off the used or spare one that I had all matches up. So there it is back in place, sort of wriggling in a little bit so the teeth engage the ring gear. And then the wiring harness has been done. I did the wiring harness before I pushed it up there too. Then the 19s have gone in from the other side. And the earth is back in place. I reattached the battery. And now it's time to hopefully restart the car. So getting the earth on goes the positive, the familiar 116 door sound. Just taking off the grubby gloves before I start this thing up. Success. And I tested it a few times and all seemed to be good. And then with any 6.9, let the thing pump up. Now, out of interest, that's a 6.3 starter I had spare, which I think was actually fit to my car once, so evidently it must fit. That's the 6.3 starter. It actually looks a little bit bigger than the 6.9. Just for interest, they do seem to be able to fit.